Hi and welcome back to the Fish Scales channel. My name's Andy. If we haven't met before, I've just started this channel in an effort to figure out how I can become the best climber I can be at the ripe old age of 56, having come back to climbing after more than a decade's break. And today we're going to be looking at the 9C climbing strength test. Now I'm going to be taking you through my baseline testing, but also as a thank you for your support for me on this fledgling channel, I'm going to give you access to an app that I've built that automatically calculates your current climbing level according to the 9C strength test, and I'll put a link to that app in the description below. So what exactly is the 9C strength test? Well, it's a set of 4 tests designed to test the functional strength that you have in the core competencies needed for climbing. It was predominantly created with lead or sport climbers in mind rather than bouldering, which is what I specialise in, but it's still a useful evaluation, as we'll come to see. It was designed as a useful way for us to figure out what we should be capable of climbing if we were operating with perfect technique on the wall. So it allows us to identify our current affordances in terms of our conditioning. The test was developed in 2020 by 2 Norwegian climbers who are also the authors of the book The Climbing Bible, which is on my current wish list. I've got their names here, so they are Stian Kristoffersen and Martin Mabreighton. Although the test was really made popular by Magnus Mitbo and some of the other YouTube influencers in the climbing scene who use this test to sort of see where they're at and whether they can head towards the mythical 9C grade, which is what you'd be awarded if you scored a perfect 40 out of 40 in these tests. And to give you some sense of comparison, the elite climbers that I've seen online are hitting somewhere in the high 20s to low 30s out of 40. And this is something that I suspect I'll never get even close to, and I'm fine with that. So what does the test consist of? Well, there are 4 different kinds of physical test. The first assesses finger strength, and it involves a 5-second hang on a 20mm edge with increasing loads. The second tests your upper body's pulling power and is tested with a weighted 1 rep max pull-up. And then we assess core strength using either hanging knee raises, an L-sit or a front lever. And then finally, endurance is assessed using a dead hang for time. And each of these 4 tests is scored out of 10 points, and then the 4 sets of 10 are added up to give you your total out of 40. And with all this in mind, you might be asking yourself, why in this clip is Andy hanging from a bar with more than 60 kilograms from his waist? And the reason is, I'm an idiot. This is what happens when you don't read the instructions carefully enough. I was so keen to get on with the test and to make best use of the rest of my day whilst I was at the climbing centre that I just didn't look at the details. Incidentally, I'm also pretty hopeless with IKEA furniture instructions. Once I realised that I needed to be hanging from a 20mm edge, I took all that weight off from around my waist, headed up towards the conditioning area at Highball where I train in Norwich, and then prepared to hang from the Beastmaster 1000. Now, don't blink or you'll miss it, but this was my best effort after a couple of reps for warming up. And as you can see, I managed to hang only for 4.15 seconds, which scores me precisely 0 on the scale. I'm pleased to say that the rest of the testing wasn't quite this pathetic, but this is clearly the area that I need to place most of my attention moving forwards. In order to test my pulling power, this involved a 1 rep max pull-up. So you begin from straight arms, you must get your chin over the bar, and you can't kip or do anything else other than just pull from your upper body. And I'm pleased to say I was able to pull up with my body weight and then 110% of my body weight and then 120%. In fact, I went up in increments of 9 kilograms because that was the simplest way of doing it with the weights I had available in the conditioning area of the gym. That brings us on to test number 3, which is to test the core, and there are 3 variations you can choose here. The first is just to hang from the bar with your knees raised at 90 degrees, and you can do that for time, or you can then go for the L-sit option, which is I did, And then the final, more challenging option is the front lever. But this is a calisthenic exercise that currently I can't do. And so I was restricted to a maximum of 6 points on this exercise. I know there's been some chatter online about whether the shift from L-sits to a front lever is actually the best way of testing the strength of the core, but this is what the test is and I'm happy to comply. And then finally we have the endurance test, which is probably the one that's least relevant for boulderers like me, but there are other reasons which I'll go into in a while about why it's still a really good exercise to try. In this case, the points awarded go up in 30-second increments for the first 8 points, and then points 9 and 10 you have to hang for an extra minute, so 5 minutes and 6 minutes respectively. It's a little disappointing that I was just 2 seconds short of what I needed to get the extra point, but I couldn't have held out any longer than I did, and I was pretty pleased with this result. Having completed all 4 tests, it was time to go into my app, enter the data and see the results. So here we are in the main body of the app. I'm going to enter my body weight at 86 kilos. For the first test for finger strength, if I had been able to hang with body weight for 5 seconds, I'd have clicked this box and been awarded 1 point automatically, but alas I did not. Moving down to the second test for pulling power, I can click this button. I did manage to pull up with my body weight, and I'm going to add 18 kilograms, which awards me 3 points. Moving on to core strength, there's a drop down menu here, and I did 20 seconds of L-sits, awarding me 6 points. And then finally, for the endurance hang, I completed 1 minute and 58 seconds. And then once all of this data has been entered, you can hit calculate results and you'll see that I am capable of climbing a 7A+, having secured 12 points according to the 9C test. And it recognizes that my strongest area was core strength and my area for most improvement was, unsurprisingly, finger strength. Now, I've built the app without any kind of database, which means that I don't need to take personal information or anything like that. So once you've used it, just make a note somewhere of your performance, and then you've got your own baseline and you can take it from there. According to this test, I should be able to climb at 7A+. At least I have the physical conditioning to be able to do so. But what does that mean? I find the grades in climbing to be bewildering. There are so many different variations, from trad climbing to French systems, Australian and British systems. There's even a Yosemite scale. And then in bouldering, we have the V scale, the French font system. And then we have to remember that route setting itself is a very subjective process, and many centres like Highball, where I climb, have their own in-house scale. And so I don't want to place too much emphasis or weight on the number or the letter that's been ascribed to me. But what I do have now is a number between 0 and 40 that I can track over time to see if I'm improving. And I think that that's where this test has real value for me. I'm going to be returning to the test again in November, which is in 3 months' time, and I'm aiming to do this quarterly and see what improvements I can make. It's also given me some really useful training targets, which I've made a note of here. So obviously finger strength is something I'm going to be working on. I also want to turn my attention in the way that I'm doing pull-ups away from the numbers of repetitions, which has been my focus, and more towards the ability to be able to generate raw power with 1 rep max and weight around my waistline. And I think that's going to translate much more accurately to the kind of work that I'm going to be doing on the wall. Then we have the challenge of learning the front lever, which I'm excited to see whether I can do so and how long it will take me. And then finally, although the max hang doesn't have any relevance to bouldering because it's not an endurance-based sport, there is a researcher who I have a lot of time for called Peter Attia, who wrote a book called Outlive. And in that book, Attia identifies that grip strength is one of the key metrics for measuring how well someone is aging. And according to his system, a healthy 40-year-old male should be able to hang for 2 minutes and a woman for 90 seconds, and that there's a reduction of 10 seconds per decade allocated. So if I can maintain 2 minutes or longer, then I'll be really happy with that as an indication that I'm aging well. I should point out that one of the subscribers observed that my hang technique was less than optimal in the video footage, and that I should really engage my scapula and have better form. And I completely concur, and that's something that I'll be working on in future videos. So that's the 9C strength test. If you haven't had a go yourself, then please do get access to the app and let me know how you find it, what your baseline is, and let's track it together. Until next time, thank you so much for watching and take care of yourself.